And for more on this promising study that Natasha was just talking about, one of its co-authors, Dr. Daria Long, joins me. She's a clinical assistant professor at the University of Tennessee. Dr. Long, thank you for coming on. Before we dive into the findings of this study, first off, would you lay out what makes this study credible and has it been peer reviewed?
Yeah, so yes, it actually has been. It's been accepted at the Journal of School Health, so has been peer reviewed. It's just waiting for publication there. And right now it's up on the preprint server. So yes. And one thing that was really exciting about it is that this is the largest that we are aware of study where we've chronologically tested every single student and staff from August through the end of December. So we did protocols and then we tested eventually every week to see how well those protocols were doing.
So the biggest takeaway from your study suggests that children may be at lower risk of infection when they're actually in school. Why is that?
So this was interesting, Pamela, and what we saw, and that was kind of one of our final conclusions from this, is what we saw is the number of cases that we had were very highest each time after kids were out on break. So when they came back in August or after fall break, after Thanksgiving, their numbers were highest. Whereas when they were in school continually, they were following these protocols and we were able to test them, we got our numbers even lower. So we had the lowest incidence when they were continually in school.
Wow, and just to be clear, how many kids were you following?
So it was two separate schools of K through 12 schools to get all the ages and the teachers, 2,300 at one school and about 1,300 at another. So about 3,600 students.
So what about in those communities with extremely high numbers of new cases and deaths, or schools that don't test as much or don't have enough PPE? Would that trend hold?
So no. So what's really important, that last point you said about not having enough PPE, what these tests highlighted were how important the protective protocols are. We're talking about masking for everyone at all times, maintaining smaller pods, maintaining distance, and really strict quarantining measures. We saw that those things worked, and that's as a result, we found that for all the kids and adults who walked in with COVID, 91% of them never transmitted COVID. The 9% that did almost always did so because there was a protocol violation. So those protocols are crucial.
And of course, one of the challenges for some schools, particularly public schools, is the funding to have the space and the PPE necessary. So I think that that's important. You pointed that out. So what do you think then, in light of your findings in the study, do you think that all teachers should be vaccinated before schools reopen?
I think it would be lovely if they could, but I think given, as you were talking in the beginning, the challenges in getting a vaccine and access to that, I think there's a way to prioritize it, because I think we should be able to prioritize our teachers to get them vaccinated. And I think that, but even if they are vaccinated, we still need to be following all these other protective protocols. So schools need to be putting that in place right now. And Pamela, the government has a very big role here. They need to make a centralized guidelines here. Each school should not have to be figuring this out and winging it. And they need to also make testing available, because right now it's really hard to get testing and it's very expensive. It was a really tough process for us. The government can help us there to make it more accessible.
That's a very important message. And just to sum up for parents who are confused, you had this week, New Jersey reported 10 new school outbreaks. Kansas reported 19 school clusters. Or earlier this month, Michigan saw outbreaks at 26 schools. So parents at home see these stories and then they see your report. They see the CDC says it's safe to go back to school. What do you say to them?
So it's safe to go back to school when you do these things, is what I say. And even in our schools, we did identify outbreaks, one traced to an off-campus party. But when you're testing and doing these things, you can identify where the outbreak is. And instead of flying blind, you can be very strategic in who you quarantine and allow the rest of the school to be in place. That was the key point, is that if we do these things, we can keep the majority of children in school safely.
I know a lot of parents, I'm sure, are watching this right now who want to get their kids back in school and find a bit of hope in your study's findings. Thank you so much, Daria. Dr. Long, we hope you'll come back on the show.
Thank you, Pamela. Have a great evening.